Shout out to G-Man Boxing. Where's the piss bottle? It's over there.
This past weekend, we seen Anthony Yarde make his return to the ring against someone who I can best describe to be an absolute pudding. He didn't look like he trained. The guy he fought, he went down the first side of trouble. And I looked at that, and I just thought to myself, what was the point in that? Like, seriously, you could say to get rid of the ring rust. What ring rust? You barely had to do anything in there. What exactly was the point of fighting that guy? What was the whole... however much you would have got for that would have been probably pennies, in the grand scheme of things. Why in God's name did he take that fight? Why in God's name did he get such a low level of opposition? And why has that been such a consistent feature in the career of Anthony Yarde? Lately it seems like decent step up, straight back down to not even English level, just pudding level is the best way we can describe it. Why? Why is it that we have a fighter who looks so polished, who has a lot of skill and athleticism there, but it's just like, unless it's a big domestic clash or a rematch like this, and I say even domestic clash, an in-house domestic clash, or a big world title fight, they don't seem to want to do anything. I mean, what is the deal with Anthony Yarde? And as many of you know, I do what I like to call WTF videos about fighters. This isn't one of them about Anthony Yarde, but I don't want it to make... They're basically career reviews. I don't want to make this a full-blown, long, drawn-out career review of Anthony Yarde, but I want to have just a glance, I should say, at his record, and just work out how we've got to where we are. Now, Anthony Yarde turned pro in 2015. I believe it was Joe Stunner who said to me that Yarde fought in Queensberry rules, or Queensberry League, on Eurosport before turning pro. Now, Queensberry League, it's kind of like... It's basically unlicensed fights. Basically, it's what they are. I think they're done over 3 rounds. I think some of them are even 2 minutes. And basically, it's just guys who aren't pro yet getting used to kind of a pro environment. It's a bit like a much weaker version of the WSB. That's kind of the best way I can describe it. So Yarde did that, had his amateur fights, made his pro debut on the 9th of May 2015 against a guy called Mitch Mitchell. Yeah, his parents really needed to work hard on that name, didn't they? Stopped him in 2 rounds. His record was 5-38. Next opponent 3-10, 2-15, 0-11, 5-5, 5-13, 1-3, 11-21. That was actually on the Canelo undercard, believe it or not. That was on the undercard of Canelo versus Liam Smith. That was Anthony Yarde's first fight out of the US or UK. Then he fought an opponent with a winning record, albeit 22-10. Darren Snow, I remember that fight, 5-12. His step up came 2 years. Now this is, bear in mind, he's been fighting cream puffs for the last 2 years. His first meaningful step up came when he won a Southern Area title versus Chris Hobbs. I remember that fight. Chris Hobbs was 6-1-1 at the time. He is now 6-3-1, so he's not won since then. Now I remember that very well, that fight. Yarde stopped him with just body shots. That was one fight where I looked at Anthony Yarde and I thought, I've always looked at Anthony Yarde and thought, look, he looks very good, he looks very polished, but he looks like he can punch. But that was one fight where I actually kind of questioned the punching power of Anthony Yarde a bit, because Chris Hobbs was never remotely damaged or hurt by a headshot. It was all body shots that took care of Chris Hobbs. He moved on from that, was out in the ring again in July of that year, and this was when the wheels were getting set in motion for Anthony Yarde to go down the route of world title, because he won the WBO European light heavyweight title, not to be confused with the EBU title, different thing altogether. The EBU is a legit European title. This is just a kind of there you go kind of title. And he fought a Hungarian, I remember the guy, Richard Bailani, I think is how you pronounce it. On paper, 18-1, decent record, absolute cream puff. Yarde took care of him in a round actually. Norbert Nesamampi. Now, I've seen him before. He is an out-and-out journeyman. Well, yeah, no, he is an out-and-out journeyman, to be fair. He had fought guys like Anthony Durrell. He had fought guys like Callum Smith. Been stopped by all these guys. But by the time Yarde fought him, he really had seen better days. Yarde took care of him. Nicholas Saloski. Now he fought Arthur Abraham. He was known for being durable, and they looked upon him as a step up fight. Having said that, he never competed at light heavyweight. He'd seen much better days and was never the best. There's never even remotely the best at all at 168. He'd seen better days. Yarde dispatched him in 4 rounds. Tony Avalant. Now that was an interesting fight. I remember that fight well. That was on. I think that card got pulled or got pushed back because it was meant to be Bradley Skeet, Daniel Dubois, and someone else. And I think it just ended up with Anthony Yarde on it. Now he knocked out Tony. We stopped Tony out in 7 rounds. Sustained beating. People said, that's good. He got rounds in. Joshua Buatsi fought him not long after, knocked him out in a round. It was about this time we started hearing Hosea Burton being talked about as a real possibility for Anthony Yarde. Could he go down the route of fighting Hosea Burton? Could he? But Hosea Burton's team were very keen on that fight. Now, Hosea Burton, in the grand scheme of things, at that time, 2018, I think he would have beaten Anthony Yarde, personally. I think the height and reach would have been a bit too much at that stage for Anthony Yarde. I don't think he developed enough. His team, however, were looking at Frank Buglioni. Now, Frank Buglioni, I think at the time he might have actually lost that British title, but at the time he was kind of in around the British level. And they were looking at that fight for him because Frank Buglioni is a good boxer. Was a good boxer anyway. He's retired now. He was more a guy who would apply pressure and kind of bring the fight to you. So you never needed to go looking for Frank Buglioni. He would come at you. So for Team Yarde, that seemed like a better fit stylistically than Hosea Burton. As I said, in reality, knowing Hosea Burton the way he fights and being 6'4", massive light heavyweight in terms of height, seeing how Yarde looked against Lyndon Arthur even as late back as last year, Hosea Burton would have had a very good chance in that fight. Again, then Yarde went back to fighting Darius Sek, who was 27-3 at the time, Walter Gabriel Squaka, I think is how you pronounce it. These were very, very poor opposition. Whilst Anthony Yarde was fighting these, extremely poor, he picked up a WBO Intercontinental title and at the same time was defending his European title. It came to the point where he was defending both titles at once, which elevated him significantly up the rankings to the point where I believe at the time he was made mandatory. He wasn't actually number 1. I believe at the time he was number 2. Marcus Brown was number 1 at WBO rankings, but he chose to go down the WBC, WBA route. That did a lot of good for him, but it meant then that Anthony Yarde would then inherit that mandatory position. I don't recall Travis Rivas being a final eliminator. It certainly wasn't, but I remember there was a lot of talk at that time, even going into that fight, that was the Royal Albert Hall in 2019, that Kovalev was next, that they were looking at taking on Sergei Kovalev then after. We'd actually heard Sergei Kovalev's name mentioned long before that. We'd heard his name be mentioned in, I believe, summer of 2018, after, I think before the Elite Alvarez loss. We'd heard, Tunde Ajayi mention Sergei Kovalev, and it was like, really? Kovalev? That Kovalev? Even though he lost, that Kovalev still? Seriously? None of us took it serious. We should have, because he beat Travis Rivas, and he went on, took a little while, but he went on to announce that he would be fighting Sergei Kovalev out there in Russia. I have to say, I picked Anthony Yarde to win that fight, hold my hands up, it was a bad pick. I was almost right, but I was wrong. I have to say, that's one of the few times in the last few years that I was really excited for a fight. Because it was the unknown. The way Tunde's PR skills isn't great. His managing skills aren't bad because he made Anthony Yarde a lot of money, and the way he was able to kind of sell that fight, sell Anthony Yarde as, a significantly better, fighter than his domestic rivals, even though he hadn't beaten anybody of note, hadn't even fought any of them. You were kind of swept in by that, and you did see Sergei Kovalev appear to be on the decline, and you started to scratch your head and wonder, could he do it? Is he right for the taking, Kovalev? Is it Yarde's time? How good is he? How good's his chin? How is his stamina? How is his boxing skills against someone who could actually fight? All these things that we did not know, because we never had a chance to see them. We never seen them. He went in there against Kovalev, and I remember it well. I remember being very excited about that fight, and straight off the bat you could see that Yarde, punch resistance ain't too bad at all. Head movements, decent. he can hang at that level. He is in that kind of frame, kind of fringe world. He can hang. Then it was the question, how was his punching power? Quite good, because he hurt Sergey Kovalev extremely badly in that fight. The issue with that fight was he never paced himself. He went for the kill. He left himself with nothing in the tank, and he was eventually stopped by Sergey Kovalev. People will say, Artem Yarde's tuning, he got knocked out by a jab. He was shattered. He was knackered come that 11th round. The jabs that he was taking early on in the fight that didn't even phase him, when you have no energy left and you're tired, you can barely hold your arms up, that jab will hurt a lot more then than it will in the second round. Now, Anthony Yarde made a low-key comeback in February 2020 against a guy called Diego Herrera Ramirez. This is kind of similar to how he basically went into this Lyndon Arthur rematch. He did that fight over in Spain. That guy was a middleweight, career middleweight, so Yarde dispatched him in 2 rounds. Fought Dex Spellman, who sadly, well, I say sadly, but amazingly, might even be his best win, to be honest with you. Beat him in 6 rounds, BS stoppage in my opinion. And then he had that Lyndon Arthur's first fight. In my opinion, and no disrespect to Lyndon Arthur's, but Anthony Yarde lost that fight more than Lyndon Arthur's won it. From my opinion, could have went either way. I think a draw would have been the fairest result, because Yarde, when he stepped on the gas, he was better. Lyndon Arthur was the better long-range boxer, and Yarde just couldn't step on the gas quick enough. I think the demons of the Kovalev fight were there in terms of the stamina, not the punch resistance, the stamina. Now, Alex Terran is the most recent victim, they say, of Anthony Yarde. That's his career in a nutshell. And, you know, as I said, Dex Spellman's probably the best win. Anthony Yarde going into this rematch with Lyndon Arthur, if he needed to fight a pudding, why didn't they put him in there against someone who was of similar dimensions to Lyndon Arthur's? Why didn't they get him in there with someone who could maybe bring him some rounds, who was a little bit more durable, who could be a bit fiddly? You can find journeymen like that. They put him in there with an absolute pudding who fold over at the first sign of trouble. I don't get, as I said at the start of this video, why you're doing that. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and maybe this is a poor analogy, but it's kind of like with Anthony Yarde, Peter Pan syndrome. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. If you've ever seen someone who, at 18, done silly things, you know, I'll hold my hands up. At 18, I was doing so many silly things, and I'm lucky some of them didn't go worse than they did, because they really could have. But now at 27, you look back and you think, geez, I wouldn't do that now. And if someone did do it now, you'd probably give them a look and be like, really? That's what they mean by Peter Pan syndrome. People who are getting old and, you know, are in their 30s, 40s, and they're still behaving like a teenager or someone in their early 20s. It's okay then, but it's not okay later. With Yarde, it's kind of similar with his career. At 25, 26, when he was on the come up, we would give him a pass a lot of these times for fighting these obscure opponents, because he was learning. He was young, he was inexperienced. Okay, but now you're 30, you've had a crack at a world title, you fought a very, very, very good domestic level opponent. Now it's not so good to be fighting these level of opposition. Now I'm raising my eyebrow when I see it, and I'm thinking, am I missing something here? Is there something still that we don't know about Anthony Yarde that they're trying to cover? Do they not have confidence that he could beat even a B-level journeyman, much less a C-level journeyman? Is that kind of where we're at with Anthony Yarde now? Because I suspect that he can beat Lyndon Arthur in the rematch, and I suspect he can do it convincingly. But how is he going to do that if he's fighting this level of opposition? If he has James Cook in his corner and he wants to try new things, why go in there with someone who's going to fall at the first sign of trouble? These are just questions I'm asking. He could be in the gym for all I know, and he could be lighting his sparring partners up. He could be showing all kinds of different things, which is fine in the gym, but there is such thing as gym fighters. You might not be able to do that on fight night. Now, Lyndon Arthur is a good operator. He is. I just wonder with Anthony Yarde, why is he being matched so carefully in between big fights? Because we do see guys take, you know, interim fights. They do. But they don't take interim fights with guys this low down, you know, in terms of levels. They could take an area level fighter or an English level fighter or someone like that, maybe, if you really wanted to be cautious. But this guy, the hell. I look at Anthony Yarde and I see such a good fighter. I've always said this. I see such a good fighter. I believe in his ability. It just irritates me when I see him be matched so carefully against guys where you, like, literally, I looked at that fight on Saturday night, and in reflection, it's just like, what was the point in that? What the hell did you gain other than maybe a couple of grand in your bank account from that? To me, it just, you would have been better off doing nothing. You know, you would have got more exercise, you know, carrying your missus to bed and, you know, doing the old how's you doing kind of thing in there, you know? That kind of would have given him more of a workout than that fight did. Literally. Anthony Yarde, I still have faith in. Even now, I still have faith in him. But I'm wondering what the hell is going on. What the F is the deal with Anthony Yarde? Hope you enjoyed this video. I just felt like I talk about his career and just kind of give my 2 cents on it. I still believe he can beat Lyndon Arthur. I still believe that fight's going to be good. It's meant to happen in October. I look forward to it. If he beats Lyndon Arthur, and it's an if because he's already lost, what next? What is the next point of call for Anthony Yarde? Another world title? You picking him over Joe Smith Jr.? I ain't. They're going to go European? Struggled. Well, didn't struggle, but lost at British level. Would European be a risk too far? It's an interesting question. I hope you enjoyed this, as I said before. If you did, if you could, smash the like button. Subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. For now, lads and lasses, I hope you have a great Wednesday. Enjoy your day. Peace.